Hi, I'm Aurelia, and I just found out my father forged documents to make the world believe I was mentally unfit, just so I wouldn't stand beside my brother in court. They erased me, one quiet act at a time. My scholarship letter, hidden, my internship, given away, my name, nearly gone from our family story. And yet, they still expected me to smile across the dinner table like nothing happened. Why did they go to such lengths to silence me? And what happens when the daughter they discarded finally speaks? Let me show you. It was a Sunday evening, the kind that made you want to light a candle and believe in comfort. The golden light streamed in through the dining room window of my parents' house in Portland, Oregon, casting soft shadows across the white lace tablecloth that hadn't changed since I was a teenager. Everything looked picture perfect. Roast chicken glistening in its pan, mashed potatoes whipped into peaks, a bowl of salad no one would eat. And yet, the air was thick, silent in all the wrong ways. I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, across from the china cabinet with its untouched wedding crystal. My mother hovered in the kitchen, pretending to check on something, while Dad sat at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on his plate as if it were a legal brief. Cassian, my older brother, the family prodigy, flashed his polished smile and reached for the wine, pouring a glass for our Aunt Zephra before even glancing in my direction. "Portland's spring smells like moss and memory," Zephra murmured, breaking the stillness. No one responded. She often said things like that, half poem, half warning. We passed dishes, forks clicked, conversation tiptoed around me. "So Cassian," Dad finally said, voice warm with pride, "how's the bar prep going? I'm sure the firm can't wait to have you full-time." Cassian shrugged with rehearsed humility. "It's going well? Long hours, but nothing I can't handle." "Of course," Dad nodded. "You've always been dependable." He didn't look at me. He never did when praise floated into the room. The chicken on my plate had grown cold. I pushed it around, careful not to make noise. I wasn't hungry anymore. I wasn't even sure why I'd come. And then, like slicing through silk with a jagged blade, he said it. "You're the reason people lose hope in their children." Silence. I blinked, pretended I didn't hear, pretended that the warmth in my face was from the wine and not the burn of shame. Zephra's hand froze mid-air, holding her fork like a question. My mother coughed and quickly asked about Cassian's lease renewal, as if she could patch over the damage with small talk. Cassian smirked, his eyes grazing over me like I was an afterthought, a glitch in the otherwise perfect simulation of our family. I excused myself not long after, citing work in the morning. No one stopped me. No one asked me to stay. On the drive home, Portland's lights blurred in the rain, a quiet soundtrack to the storm building inside my chest. Back in my apartment, I changed into sweatpants and poured a glass of red wine. I curled up on the couch and, out of some morbid curiosity, opened Instagram. There it was, Cassian's graduation dinner invitation posted by his fiancée. Everyone was tagged: Mom, Dad, Zephra, even my cousins from San Diego, but not me. A message pinged from a former classmate. "Are you going to be at Cassian's dinner next week? Would love to catch up." My stomach twisted. No one had told me, no one had planned to. I closed the app, locked my phone, and stared at the ceiling. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they had just forgotten. Or maybe forgetting me had become easier over time. I rummaged through an old drawer and found a dusty camcorder. On a whim, I played one of the tapes. Cassian, 12 years old, sitting at the kitchen table as I quizzed him for his science test. I was 15. I'd made him flashcards. He'd giggled every time I messed up a word on purpose. In the background, our mother was humming, and our father was still distant but not quite yet cruel. I paused the tape. My reflection in the dark screen stared back, hollowed and tired. I opened my notes app, typed a message to my father. "I know you think I'm a disappointment, but I've tried, even if you didn't see it." Then I stared at it and deleted it. If I disappeared tomorrow, would they even notice? The echo of my own words lingered longer than they should have. If I disappeared tomorrow, would they even notice? I'd whispered that into the dark, to no one. And yet it clung to me like morning mist. Sunday had bled into Monday, and now it was Tuesday. I stood at the edge of my childhood driveway, casserole dish in hand, the ceramic still faintly warm, though I'd made it yesterday. The excuse was thin, I knew. But I needed to go back, not for nostalgia, but for something else, my old planner, or so I told myself. The sky was its usual Portland gray, a fine drizzle cooling my cheeks. I took slow steps to the door, hoping it wouldn't open too fast. But there she was, Mom, in her soft slippers, cardigan buttoned to the throat. "Aurelia?" she said, surprised but smiling. "You didn't have to bring the dish back so soon." "I figured it'd get lost in the shuffle if I waited," I said, giving a tight smile. "Mind if I go up to the attic? I left something." She hesitated a second too long. "Of course, but be careful, it's a mess up there." The attic still smelled like thyme and cedar. I pushed open a few dusty boxes and kept my ears sharp, in case she decided to follow. I wasn't just looking for a planner. I didn't know what, something that would explain the ache in my chest every time I came back here. In the kitchen, while waiting for her to step away, I absent-mindedly flipped through an old cookbook left on the counter. A folded edge caught my finger. Something thin and firm was wedged inside. I tugged, and a cream-colored envelope fluttered to the floor. I picked it up. My name was written on it, my full name, in my mother's careful script. No postmark. Unopened. My hands trembled. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out the letter. My eyes scanned, then widened. "Dear Ms. Aurelia Vance, we are pleased to offer you full admission and a full scholarship to the University of Chicago Law School." 12 years ago. 12 years. I staggered back, nearly knocking over a mixing bowl. My breath caught, sharp and shallow. I sat on the tile floor, the letter limp in my lap. I remembered the day I thought I'd been rejected. I remembered how I'd cried in the shower, how I stopped answering calls from the career counselor, how I folded away my ambition like an old coat. Why? Why didn't I ever receive this? Footsteps above startled me. I stood and pressed the letter into my coat pocket. In the attic again, I started pulling boxes more forcefully. A planner wouldn't tell me anything, but maybe my father's office drawers would. The old cassette recorder was there, sitting lopsided with a film of dust. I accidentally knocked it over, and the thing whirred to life with a soft, mechanical hum, then a voice. My father's. "She's a soft spot in the family legacy. If anyone finds out, we lose credibility." Another voice mumbled, then his again. "Aurelia was never built for this. She's a disgrace. Diane just won't admit it." I stood frozen, the words vibrating against my ribs. I'd imagined worse, of course, but hearing it, raw, unfiltered, so certain, it gutted me. I turned the recorder off with a sharp snap. Dinner that night was a quiet thing. Dad wasn't home, just Mom and I, again. She asked about my job, if I was still dating that barista guy. I didn't answer. Instead, I held the envelope under the table, thumb brushing its edge. Say something, I told myself. Ask her why. Confront it. But I didn't. Instead, I watched her pass the green beans, humming softly to herself like nothing in the world had shifted. Back at my apartment that night, I took the letter out once more. It had the slightest scent, old paper and lavender hand lotion. I stared at it until my vision blurred. Then finally, I said it aloud. I could have been something. The woman's voice on the line was crisp, efficient. "State Attorney's Office. How may I direct your call?" I didn't know what I was doing. My hand hovered over the phone as if her words had frozen me. Then I mumbled, "Sorry, wrong number," and hung up before she could respond. It wasn't a lie, technically. I had no intention of making a report. Not yet. But I needed to hear someone say those words to confirm the power that might someday stand behind me. I wasn't crazy. Something unjust had happened to me. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the one who should feel ashamed. That Sunday was unusually warm for Portland. The early spring sun hung low, kissing the rooftops and painting the sidewalks in honeyed light. I walked to Aunt Regina's small cottage in Ladd's Addition. She'd asked me to come by for fresh mint and thyme. I suspected she just needed the company, or maybe she knew I did. Her front yard looked like something out of a forgotten fairy tale. Lavender, rosemary, creeping thyme, all tangled up and fragrant. I knocked lightly on the chipped blue door, and she called out for me to come in. Regina was already in the kitchen, steeping something in a worn-out teapot. Her back was curved, her gray hair pulled into a half-hearted twist. "Tea?" she asked, without turning. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We sat on the porch, sipping from mismatched mugs. There was a silence between us, thick but not uncomfortable. Not yet. After a long while, she spoke. "You ever wonder why you didn't get that summer internship back in college? The one with Marson Delaney?" The question felt like a soft punch to the chest. "Of course I wondered," I said quietly. "I thought I wasn't chosen. They never responded to my application." Regina sighed. "They did. I know because your father intercepted it. He told them you were unreliable, that you'd withdrawn from school." My breath caught in my throat. "I never did." "I know," she said softly. "He didn't want you working where Cassian was headed. Said it'd complicate things. Said it was better for the family if you stayed peripheral." I blinked rapidly, trying to stay composed. Peripheral, like background music to someone else's life. Back home, I rummaged through the bottom drawer of my desk. I still kept the external hard drive where I stored all my old data, photos, backups, notes from law classes I never finished. Among the folders was a file labeled Old iPhone. I clicked it open and found an exported message log. I don't even remember doing it. Maybe I was trying to preserve proof for something, anything, before resetting the phone. My hands trembled as I read the texts between my father and Cassian, dated 8 years ago. Father: "Let her apply. She won't last a month." Cassian: "You think she'll even get in?" Father: "Bet you $100 she drops out before week 2. It wasn't just that they hadn't believed in me. It was the casualness, the mockery. My ambitions were punchlines in their private conversations. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My fingers clenched the mouse so tightly I could feel the imprint digging into my palm. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, holding the printed messages in one hand and the unopened letter from the University of Chicago in the other. "I never had a chance," I whispered. "Not really." The truth hit harder than I expected. This wasn't miscommunication. It wasn't an accident. It was orchestration. I lit a candle and sat in the dark, letting the anger settle into my bones. Then, without quite knowing why, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I found scribbled years ago on a business card. It rang. Once, twice. Then, "State Attorney's Office. How may I direct your call?" The moment I stepped out of the restaurant, the crisp Portland night felt like it had teeth. I stood for a second on the stone steps, letting the cold air press against my face like a warning or a balm. I couldn't tell. Behind me, the sounds of laughter and clinking silverware had turned into a buzzing silence. My hands still trembled from the weight of what I'd just done. And then my phone rang. "Unknown number," it read. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something inside me, some stubborn core that hadn't yet been bruised out of me, answered. "We saw what you did," the voice crackled, distorted and low. And that was only step 1, Aurelia. The call dropped before I could say anything. I stood there blinking at my screen, heart hammering harder now than it had at that dinner table. Step 1 of what? Who was we? For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't feel small. I felt alert, alive. Whoever that voice belonged to, they'd seen what I'd just survived. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this after all. The next morning, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, a half-empty coffee mug beside me and my laptop glowing dimly. I replayed the dinner in my mind. The way my brother smirked, my father's dismissive grunt, my mother's retreat into her phone. But most of all, I remembered the sudden hush that fell when I laid down the evidence, my truth. I hadn't screamed, I hadn't cried, I just stood. The voice on the phone had reignited something. I opened a new document and began writing every detail I could recall, not just about the internship, but about the scholarship, the deleted texts, the things I'd buried for too long. This wasn't just a memory dump, it felt like a declaration. Midway through typing, a knock came at my door. Not the soft kind, not hesitant. I peeked through the peephole. It was Aunt Regina. She looked tired, her mascara slightly smudged as if she hadn't expected to see anyone. When I opened the door, she didn't waste a second. "I shouldn't have let it go on," she said, eyes not quite meeting mine. I didn't know about the scholarship, but the internship, I knew. I knew he blocked it. I let her in, wordless, my throat too tight to speak. She hovered near the doorway, her coat still on. "I thought maybe, if Cassian made it big, it would reflect well on all of us. Your father said you weren't interested anymore. I should have asked you. I should have fought." Her voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the younger version of her, the one who once slipped me extra cookies and called me Bright Eyes. "I'm not here to beg forgiveness," she added, "but if you want help, real help, I have names, contacts, people your father can't bully." A beat passed. I didn't offer tea. I didn't soften the silence, but I nodded. By evening, I'd compiled a list of every opportunity that had quietly passed me by, every unopened door I hadn't even known existed. I also started researching the voice. I dug through recent call logs, apps that mask numbers, even online message boards for legal whistleblower forums. Nothing definitive came up. But I did find a pattern. My father's former firm had been involved in multiple silenced complaints, alleged ethical breaches. And each time, Cassian's name was there too, on the periphery. I stared at the firm's logo on my screen, sharp serif font, gold on navy. I once thought of it as a tower I'd never reach. Now, it felt like a wall I might just break through. Later that week, I met with a journalist, a friend of a friend from Regina's garden club. We spoke in the back of a coffee shop near Reed College. She listened more than she spoke, her recorder clicking softly between us. "They call it strategic erasure," she said after I finished. "When someone with power edits you out before you even start, it happens more than people think, especially in families like yours." I'd never heard it put that way, but it felt right, a lifetime of being written out, like I'd never mattered enough to warrant a footnote. As I walked out, she called after me. "We're going to tell this right, Aurelia. You're not invisible anymore." And for the first time since I found that unopened envelope, I believed her. The voicemail was still echoing in my ears when I walked into the office Monday morning. "We saw what you did. And that was only step one, Aurelia." A voice, masked and modulated. I replayed it 3 times before deleting it. The words hadn't scared me. They energized me. For once, someone saw me. I wasn't invisible. Not anymore. The sun filtered lazily through the tall windows of the legal aid office in Portland's Pearl District, streaking gold across my cluttered desk. I'd barely taken my coat off when the receptionist buzzed me. "You have a visitor?" she said, with the kind of voice that knew something was off but didn't dare ask. I already knew. Only one person could strut into a room with entitlement so potent it made the air heavier. Cassian. He stood by the doorway in a navy suit too sharp for this part of town, holding 2 cups of coffee like a peace offering from a politician. His cologne hit me before his smile did, clean, expensive, and deeply artificial. "I figured you'd want something warm," he said, holding out the cup. I didn't move. "You think I'm cold?" He chuckled, brushing imaginary lint from his sleeve. "Come on, Aurelia, let's talk." He followed me into my office without invitation, placing the coffees down and sliding a manila folder across my desk. "Let's just cut through the drama. I'm here for both of us." I flipped the folder open. Inside, a typed legal agreement, thick with legalese, and a check. 5 figures. It shimmered like a bribe dressed in formality. He leaned back. I want us to move forward. This, he tapped the check, isn't guilt, it's closure. I read silently, non-disclosure clauses, restrictions about media, legal entities, references to historical familial misunderstandings. Carefully worded, meticulously veiled, but its core was poison. You think I'm for sale? I said. I think you're tired, he replied. This fight will drain you, you know that. I looked him in the eye. Is this what integrity looks like to you? He laughed, soft, patronizing. You're not built for this game, Aurelia. Maybe not your game, I said, placing the folder back between us, untouched. His jaw twitched. He wasn't used to people saying no, especially not me. You've always had this hero complex, he said. You think you're the wronged underdog, but you were never meant for that internship. Or that firm. You were soft. No, I said calmly. I was sidelined. By you. By him. And she let it happen. He rose, adjusting his cuffs. We're done here. I stood too, voice steady. If you want silence, you'll need more than a check. You'll need an eraser big enough to rewrite everything I remember. He paused, hand on the doorknob. You'll see my name again, I added, just not where you expect it. He didn't say goodbye, just walked out. That night, I sat on my couch, letter and text screenshots scattered like war plans. I was ready to fight. Whatever this next chapter was, it was mine. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked up. A text. We believe you. We need your help. A few days later, the message replay rattled through my mind again. We believe you. We need your help. I had learned to drown out doubt before. It was time to replace it with determination. It was Tuesday evening when I slipped into a quiet corner of a coffee shop in Selwood Moorland. At exactly 7, a woman tapped my shoulder. She was in her late 40s, her posture stiff but her eyes kind. She slid a small flash drive across the table, never introducing herself. They tried to destroy you on paper before they ever let you try in court, she said softly. I'm Marcy. I used to work at your father's firm. Something in me tensed, an old fear and an old wound, but I accepted it, unclenched my jaw. Thank you, I whispered. Back in my apartment, I plugged the drive into my laptop. My heart thudded. What I saw made my breath catch. PDF files. There were pages labeled Psych Eval, Client Allegations, and Professional References. I double-clicked. The documents claimed I had chronic delusional episodes, labeled me unfit for litigation, and made sound inferences that I was emotionally unstable. These files had made the rounds to law fellowship boards that I'd never known considered me. My hands shook. These forged reports had torn my credibility long before I realized it. Then I saw draft rejection letters dated 8 years ago, letters to firms that had initially offered interviews. But the letters, marked approved for sending, were never mailed. The applications disappeared. No record. And worst, a memo in my father's handwriting sent to Human Resources, typed but signed. She must not be permitted to build credibility in the legal community, it read. I stared until tears blurred my vision. My ambition wasn't just ignored, it was actively erased. I shut the laptop and took a deep breath. It was time to take control. I printed the forged files, letters, and memos. I scanned copies, then locked the originals in my home safe. By 9 p.m., I had created an alias email address, encrypted a folder, and sent packages to 3 trusted investigative journalists. The subject line read, Sunlight to Rotting Roots. As the final packet uploaded, the lights flickered. My heart leaped. Then everything went dark. The laptop hummed as it shut down. I heard footsteps, soft, deliberate, in the hallway. My breath froze. A whisper followed. You shouldn't have touched what wasn't yours. It was a warning. I pressed myself against the wall, phone in hand. No badge. No authority. Just someone who understood my strategy and wanted to scare me, but fear didn't take root. Instead, I felt ready. The steps I had taken might have started something much bigger than me. The lights flickered back to life just after midnight, leaving a faint buzz in the air like an apology for their earlier disappearance. I stood there in the quiet, heart still hammering from that voice in the hallway, just a whisper, barely audible. But I knew it wasn't imagined. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch until the horizon burned a weak gray, too dull to be dawn, too late to be night. When I finally walked back into my bedroom, something felt off. My safe. The small digital lockbox I kept beneath the cedar chest was ajar. I hadn't touched it since last night. The flash drive, gone. The printed letters, the originals, the firm memos, all of it. My evidence. I fell to my knees. My hands trembled as I checked the window. The latch was pried loose. Someone had come in through the fire escape. The rest of the apartment looked untouched. No jewelry taken. No electronics missing. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. I called the police, filed the report. The officer, mid-40s, polite, skeptical, nodded and jotted a few notes. No signs of forced entry at the front, just the window? He asked. I nodded. He shrugged. Probably a random break-in. You were lucky. I didn't correct him. I just watched him leave. That night, after the world settled into its usual hum of sleep, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Hello? A pause, then, Aurelia, it's Mateo. His voice hadn't changed. My ex-fiancé, now with the district attorney's office in Multnomah County. We hadn't spoken in years. I know I shouldn't call, he continued, but I figured you'd want a heads up. An anonymous petition was filed this morning with the State Bar Association. Claims of mental instability. It's thin, but serious enough they'll investigate. I didn't speak. They're trying to discredit you before you can do anything. I almost laughed. Of course they were. It was the same script, just rewritten. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. He paused. Because I know you, and I know you're not crazy. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long while. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a war. The next morning, a woman was waiting outside my building. Tan suit, pale lips, no expression. She watched me approach, arms folded like she had the upper hand in a chess game I hadn't agreed to play. I'd like to talk, she said without introduction. No thanks. She took a step closer. It'd be easier on everyone if you just walked away. That's all. I waited. She handed me a business card. Blank, except for the initials RG. I assume that's supposed to mean something to me? I asked. She gave a cold smile. Not yet. She turned and walked away. By noon, I was gone. I booked a one-night motel just across the river in Vancouver, Washington. Cheap, anonymous, and far enough from my apartment to breathe. From there, I re-uploaded everything I still had, backups, screenshots, copies of the letter I'd kept, fragments of Marcy's files, to a newly created encrypted cloud folder. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Jennifer Sloan at the Oregonian. I told her I had a story. I told her I was ready to go on the record. Her voice didn't flinch. Then let's talk. It was late when I finally allowed myself to rest. The motel was quiet. The air conditioner hummed its lullaby. For a moment, I believed I was ahead. Then came the knock. Soft, deliberate. I approached slowly, heart hammering. My hand hovered over the lock, and then from the other side, a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade whispered, Aurelia, it's me. Please, don't scream. The knock came just after midnight. The motel room was nearly silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner. I pressed myself against the door, heart pounding like a drum. My hand trembled on the latch. Aurelia. "It's me," someone whispered. "Please, don't scream." It was Noah, my half-brother, the son my father never mentioned. He stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The stale motel air shifted, charged with something new. Relief, fear, both. He handed me his phone. 3 months ago, he said quietly. "Here." I tapped play. My father's voice. "Aurelia cannot be allowed to rise again. We bury her now or never." The words hit like a physical blow. Unlike the old cassette recording, this was fresh, intentional. Starving her of opportunity wasn't enough. He wanted her erased. I sat in stunned silence, betrayed and vindicated all at once. Noah sank into a chair, looking older than 24, angry, ashamed. Later that evening, Aunt Zephra, Cynthia, as I'd learned, sent a formal invitation, a family dinner. I suspected what it was, but I accepted, taking Noah along, not as a token, but as a witness. We arrived at Dad's house, the place where everything began. The table was set elegantly, flowers, crystal, silence thicker than usual. My family trickled in, mother, father, Cation, cousins, tension coiled around us. When Dad spoke first, I calmly pulled out my phone and tapped play. The room froze at his voice, cold, deliberate. He stared at me, unmoving. He denied it. "That wasn't my voice," he said. His face went pale when Noah pressed play again. Unrelenting. It matched, even in tone, cadence, hesitation. My mother gasped. Cousins lowered their eyes. I spoke softly, steadily. "You built your empire on silence. I am done being quiet." Chaos followed. Voices raised. My father's hand shook. My mother cried silently. Kazian looked betrayed, his guilt unmasked. A calm settled inside me. I watched as truth worked its destructive beauty. After dinner, Dad stormed out. One uncle approached Noah, offering legal guidance. Another aunt whispered apologies. I hugged Noah warmly, for the first time really knowing each other. "You weren't crazy," he said. "You were right." Tears mingled with relief. That night, alone again, I checked my email. An unknown sender had just delivered a message. Subject: Careful who you trust. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. Attachment: a photo of Noah and me at dinner, taken earlier by someone else. Fear bubbled up, but not panic. Instead, resolve. They knew we'd exposed something. But exposure was necessary. Painful, yes, but necessary. I leaned back as the motel lamp flickered. I had forced the reckoning. Now I had to own what comes next. The first frost came quietly, dressing my window in a soft lace of white that melted slowly under the hesitant Portland sun. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, sorting through the week's unopened mail, my mind still circling the photo I had received, me and Noah, taken just hours after the intervention. Someone had been close. Too close. That's when I saw the envelope. No return address, just my name in elegant script. But the postmark was from an old address, the law firm I had interned with in my early 20s. The firm where I had once believed a future might take root before silence and sabotage set in. I opened it slowly, heart low in my chest. Inside was a single page of thick stationery. The header read, Rebecca Purnell. My hands trembled as I read. Aurelia, I owed you more than silence. I see that now. You were right about so much, and I made it easier for them to erase you. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope this helps balance the scale a little. Enclosed is the 1997 Partnership Agreement, the unedited version. Pay close attention to Section 6B, RP. I unfolded the second sheet with deliberate care, already sensing its weight. Section 6B detailed a stipulation buried in legalese, but its message was unmistakable. Any ownership transfer involving direct family members was prohibited unless unanimously approved by the non-family partners. That approval had never happened. My father's iron grip on the firm wasn't just unethical. It had violated state statute. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I reached for the phone. My uncle, not the loud one who sided with father at every gathering, but the quiet one who'd whispered support after the intervention, met me at a downtown cafe that afternoon. He read the document twice before nodding gravely. "This is more than a crack," he said. "It's an opening." Together, we drafted a petition to the Oregon State Bar, attaching the contract, my affidavit, and a timeline of ethical violations dating back years. It was methodical, cold, deliberate. By the time the envelope was sealed and sent, my hands had steadied. My voice, too. A week later, the reply came. Not only would the bar review my petition, they were reopening a sealed ethics complaint from 2002, a file that had long been marked closed without merit, buried by a former board chair who was now conveniently deceased. This time, they assured me it would be different. I didn't smile, not exactly, but the tightness in my chest gave way to something resembling space. That evening, I walked alone through Laurelhurst Park. The trees were mostly bare, their silhouettes long and reaching against the fading light. I passed the bench I used to sit on in law school, where I'd once highlighted case files with naive certainty. Up ahead, a girl sat cross-legged on the grass, her laptop propped against her knees, lips moving silently as she practiced aloud. Her brow furrowed in that familiar way, determined, unsure. I approached slowly and knelt beside her. "You look like you could use a break," I said, holding out a thermos. "It's still warm." She blinked at me, surprised. Then took it. "Thanks," she whispered. I stood, brushing leaves from my coat. "You're going to be great someday," I told her, and meant it. Later, as I curled beneath a blanket with my laptop humming beside me, my phone buzzed once. Voicemail. The number was unknown, but something in my gut twisted before I even hit play. The voice was filtered, low, grainy. "You think you've won," it said. "We're not done, Aurelia." That voicemail lingered in my mind longer than any sunrise could. The truth, that Jacob was my half-brother, shifted everything. I replayed his voice recording over and over as I stared out my apartment window, the gray morning light feeling heavier than before. I needed clarity, so I called the number back. Jacob answered on the third ring. His voice was hesitant, wary. I stayed silent until he spoke. "It was me," he said softly. "That call. I was in Portland last night." My pulse jumped. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "There's a lot you don't know," he said. "About Dad. About us." Our meeting took place in Eugene, in a nondescript diner where the coffee smelled stale, but the chairs felt solid. Jacob arrived minutes early, suit still crisp, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. I studied him. Someone who shared blood with my father, but had been kept hidden for decades. He asked for coffee and ordered it strong. He looked down at his hands before speaking. "You weren't supposed to see the world the way I did," he said. "When I found out Dad kept me secret, I wanted answers." I stayed calm. "What do you want from me?" He took a breath, face twisting with residual pain. "You had choices I never got. You had a name, a future. They built that future at my expense, at yours." I blinked. "So what now?" He leaned forward. "I have access to files, internal emails, recordings, voice memos, enough to tear the firm down. But it has to be together, because they will come for me too." I let that settle. "I won't give up," he nodded. "I know." Back at the office, I told my uncle about Jacob. I explained the files, the call, the confrontation. He listened quietly in his living room, sunlight falling over law books and aged furniture. A week later, an IT contractor, assigned by the ethics board, requested access to the firm's internal servers for archival review. When processing the backup tapes, he found a hidden folder. In it lay hundreds of documents, including one marked Emergency Maternal Note, dated 20 years earlier. I held the printed memo in trembling hands. My mother's cursive spilled through the aged paper. "Jim, I beg you, don't drag our daughter into your legal warpath. Please let her be. She deserves a life." She had written it when I first entered college, and he had filed it silently, ignored it forever. Tears stung my vision, not because I felt weak, but because I felt the weight of a language denied. I framed the memo gently, placing it on my desk beside Jacob's voicemail transcript and the corporate contract document from my mentor, Rebecca. I compiled the files, added the memo as supplemental evidence, then sent a formal packet to the ethics board. Jacob confronted me afterward. "You're adding the letter from her," he said. "You're bringing her into this." I met his gaze. "She belongs." Jacob exhaled, nodding slowly. A brief moment passed, then he shook his head. "Let him open the door. I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon, I received an email I'd been waiting for. Subject line: Request for final deposition. Delaney versus Delaney. I stared at the screen a long time, then I stood, straightened my shoulders, and closed my laptop. Because this time, when the door opened, I would step through, not as a victim but as Aurelia. I arrived at the administrative court in Salem just as the early morning light hit the oak trees lining the driveway. The building's facade felt imposing in its stillness. Inside, I took a deep breath and walked into the room where the day would decide far more than a legal dispute. It would shape my own legacy. The courtroom brimmed with tension. Jacob sat across the aisle, flanked by his team in crisp suits. I carried only a notebook and my calm determination. I registered each familiar face: reporters, colleagues, distant relatives. But most of all, I felt the gaze of the judge on me. The proceedings began with juristic formality, but soon it became clear this was not routine. When my turn came, I stood confidently. I was questioned about ethics violations tied to my father's firm and the contested trust. My voice was steady but quiet. When Jacob's lawyer tried to paint me as a manipulator motivated by vendetta, I replied that I had no financial stake. My only goal was integrity, honesty, and accountability. I remembered all the moments I had been erased, not for greed, but for speaking truth. Each word felt clear, each gesture deliberate. Halfway through, there was a shift. The bailiff called Deborah Fay, a retired paralegal, unexpectedly. She walked slowly to the stand, holding a sealed affidavit. The room fell silent. Her voice, tempered by age and regret, revealed that my father had altered estate documents once he learned of his illness. He had revised wills and trust filings to leave the firm intact, despite my mother's pleas in that silent memo from decades ago. I felt a jolt in my chest, not shock exactly, but release. The weight of suspicion, unacknowledged for so long, had finally found evidence. I caught sight of Jacob's face, pale and rigid, and I let that moment linger quietly. Then Jacob spoke. His voice cracked as he admitted his father had promised him the firm once I left law school. He said he never wanted it. Not really. He wanted recognition, the validation of being the son of Merrick, not merely his echo. For centuries I'd seen his ambition. Now I saw the emptiness within it. As I rose for closing remarks, I looked at the judge, then across at the empty seat where my mother should have sat. I focused on the past, not to relitigate it, but to expose the maze of lies that shaped our family truth. "I'm not pursuing money," I said into the hush. "I'm seeking honesty." It wasn't about ownership. It was about a story they edited out to maintain their narrative. The judge leaned forward, pen poised, eyes steady. Deliberation would begin behind closed doors. Outside, the crisp air from the courthouse entrance embraced me. I felt both lighter and exposed, not entirely healed, but moving forward. I texted Jacob. "Thanks for showing up. This is just the beginning." A small voice whispered from beside me. "I'm proud of you." It was Noah, next to his attorney. A light glance between us held decades of unspoken reconciliation. That evening, I walked alone through Laurelhurst Park. The trees were skeletal in silhouette, but the air felt vast. I sat on the bench where I once studied, imagining the life that letter never gave me, and the life I'd build instead. A girl walked by, carrying casebooks and hope. I offered her my thermos. "You're going to be great," I said before she blinked and smiled. Nothing was certain yet. The bar petition's outcome still hung in the balance. But as the sun dipped low, I felt something shift. Beneath my ribs, something unbroken. The courthouse steps were slick with rain, a gray veil hanging over downtown Salem like a tired sigh. Reporters stood beneath umbrellas, murmuring in low tones until the wooden doors creaked open. I stepped out first, not because I wanted to be seen, but because I needed it to end. Inside, the judge's voice still echoed in my bones. The trust declared invalid, my father's alterations deemed fraudulent, Jacob's petitions dismissed. I had been named executor, sole legal successor to the firm and its holdings. Every eye in the courtroom had turned to me, waiting for celebration. There would be none. I walked past the cameras and paused at the small podium hastily set up for press briefings. I unfolded a page I'd rewritten 5 times and spoken to the wind. I won't inherit a legacy built on silence and harm. This firm, once built to protect the law, became a place where it was bent to hurt the most vulnerable, starting within its own walls. I will dissolve the McKenna firm immediately. The residual assets will fund legal aid and shelter initiatives for women and youth across Oregon. The wind caught the edge of my paper, but I held steady. No more heirs to ambition, only closure. There was no applause, just the shifting of feet, the scribble of pens. I didn't wait for questions. In the parking lot, I heard him before I saw him. Aurelia. Jacob stood by his car, rain beating on his coat, his face drawn. "I need to say something." I didn't move closer. "I forged something," he said, voice trembling. "Years ago. A memo. I blamed you for Mom's breakdown. Said your absence pushed her over the edge. I needed a villain. He stopped himself, eyes red. "I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." I walked to him, slowly. The slap was soft, more of a severing than a punishment. His eyes didn't rise to meet mine again. That evening, I opened the door to my new office, 2 rooms above a second-hand bookstore in Northeast Portland. The sign on the glass read, Pro Bono Justice Initiative, underneath a director, A. McKenna. On my desk sat a new nameplate, simple brass, Aurelia Caldwell, my mother's name, before she gave it away. In the adjoining room, an intern, Carmen, was walking a nervous client through intake paperwork. I let her take the lead. The younger ones needed space to learn what no one had given me. I made tea. I watched the city lights flicker on. The rain had returned, tapping the windows with a rhythm older than memory. I reached for the small lamp on my desk and turned it on, casting soft gold across the room. And I thought, as I always had, in silence. I was born of their storm, but I became my own weather. Sometimes healing doesn't come with applause or a perfect ending. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a light turned on in a room that was dark for too long. I learned that justice isn't just about the courtroom. It's about reclaiming your voice, even when the ones who should have protected you tried to silence it. If you've ever felt like the underdog in your own family or questioned your worth because someone powerful told you that you didn't belong, let me be the one to tell you, your truth matters. You matter. We all carry histories that were written for us, but we get to choose how the next chapter begins. Whether you're fighting for your own dignity, for someone you love, or simply for peace, you're not alone. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when it felt impossible? What did you learn from it? Drop a comment below. Just type 1 if this story hit your heart, or let me know where in the US you're watching from. If you didn't connect with this story, that's okay too. Tell me why and what you'd like to see instead. If this video moved you or made you reflect on your own life, please subscribe to the channel. There are more stories to come, true, raw, and rooted in the quiet strength we all carry.